back to an episode of the Open Source Cafe. Today we have Toby joining us, and we're going to talk about ZeroOps. So if you haven't heard it before, I haven't covered it on my channel yet, but we talk a lot more about how it can help developers save their time and how it can enhance developer productivity. But before we get started, Toby, would you like to give yourself a quick intro and tell our viewers a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, certainly. Hi, my name's Toby Bellwood. I'm the Lagoon lead at Amazy.io, so responsible for our open source application deployment platform, Lagoon. I'm based in Canberra, Australia, and it's my evening, so I apologise if there's small noises behind me of people running around. But yeah, I've been at Amazy.io for 2.5 years. Prior to that, I ran technical teams in the Australian government, web, open data, open spatial areas.
Amazing, and thanks a lot for joining us today. And interested in speaking more about ZeroOps. For folks who may not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about on this about this new tech concept, right? And a little bit elaboration.
So yeah, the whole idea behind ZeroOps is to give those developers their time back. To try and the whole principle of DevOps was to bring developers and operations closer together. The whole principle of ZeroOps is to try and basically remove tasks from people that don't need to be doing those tasks. So when we're talking about developers specifically, in our sort of Amazy.io Lagoon space, we're looking mostly at web application developers. So people building websites, people running web presences. There's a huge DevOps behind that. But ZeroOps is about sort of automating everything that can be automated, trying to take some of the friction out of letting developers build sites that scale and perform, and letting operations teams do the serious technical work running and managing Kubernetes clusters, and the two basically being able to operate in their spaces with their expertise and focusing on their particular goals and not having to cross-skill, not having to dig too deep into the other person's patch.
Amazing. So you spoke about developers, you spoke about then operators, and essentially it's helping you save time. But from both of these individuals' point of view, can you share maybe how is it helping, give them their time back?
So from a developer point of view, so when we look at sort of Amazy.io and Lagoon as a ZeroOps application delivery platform, allowing developers to basically push code, monitor the status of their builds and see the outcomes without them having to worry about how to optimize and fine-tune Kubernetes or fine-tune virtual machine settings, without having to worry about how to set scaling parameters or deal with resource allocations or optimizing ingresses, etc. From an operations point of view, dealing in sort of Kubernetes native terms, so looking at an application from a straight Kubernetes point of view without having to essentially worry about how the application performs on the Kubernetes. It's more you're worried about, are your pods spinning up? Are your resources looking good? Are your scaling events happening when they're scaling? The application deployment platform is really taking the complexity out of some of that process for you.
Amazing. And in turn, in addition to that, now we spoke about how it's benefiting developers, operators. That basically then helps companies as well. Can be more agile and can provide better experience and increased revenue.
Yeah, a lot of our customers are people who manage and maintain multiple sites. They might maintain and manage them on behalf of internal teams, internal organizations. They may be a sort of a web agency, a digital agency who's got a number of customers. And ultimately, the focus for those teams has got to be on productive work. So it's got to be making those updates, pushing that code, getting the features in front of clients. The more time they spend doing the behind the scenes work is less time that they can spend focusing on stuff that really genuinely hits the client in that wow spot.
Amazing. Well, thanks a lot for sharing. And can you tell us a little bit more about so we talk about it's increasing developer productivity, and we're talking about an application delivery platform. So So basically, is it similar to something like I've heard about like no ops, or is it different from that?
It's similar. It's along similar lines. What we talk about is basically specifically tailored to that web application. So when you're looking at putting an application on the web, what's needed for that? What's needed to run a website? You need databases. Most web applications are multiple service. So you've got search, you've got cache, you've got multiple layers of web heads, you've got worker processes, etc. So we basically focus on providing all of those services as streamlined as possible. When we look at a development workflow for a developer, we know that lots of developers will still develop on their local machine. There's a lot of cloud IDE solutions out there, but a lot of people still prefer to develop on their local. So what we really focus on is making sure someone's got a local development solution, so they can spin up the website, they can stand their code up, they can make sure that the CSS, the JavaScript they've just pushed, the config that they've just updated for their particular site looks exactly as it should do, really making sure that we can then replicate that local result into production. So all the person should have to do is push their piece of code, git commit it. The application delivery platform will read that git commit and will push it up into production for them. And we want our users to be 100% confident that what they see in their dev test PR environment is the same as they saw on their local, really removing that hassle, that worry, having to watch something go through, having to check that it's the same, having to check that it's the same version, and then being able to produce an asset that you can share with your customers. If you're doing work, if you're doing tickets, if you're working as part of an agile team, being able to work on a particular pull request, send the link across to whoever in your team's doing the QA, doing the testing role, they can approve that, they can roll on. You can basically just keep pushing through your work, pushing through your tasks without having to think about all the things that come around the outside of it.
Yeah. Just like developers now, like they don't have to really care about it.
I mean, I'm sure they still care about it, but they don't have to spend as much time caring about it as they probably did, because and as anyone who's technical knows, once you're in the flow, you're in the flow. And the more time you spend worrying about other things or checking or following statuses, the more time that the longer it takes you to get back into that flow state again.
Yeah. No, I agree. Cool. All right. And for an organization or like the teams we were talking about, if they haven't like yet implemented it, how would they go about implementing ZeroOps in their workflow?
So our application delivery platform is called Lagoon. Lagoon is basically it's an application delivery platform that lives on top of Kubernetes. We have a range of models that we deploy for our Amazy.io customers, but Lagoon is also an open source. It's fully open source project, and we work actually with a number of users out there who've implemented it completely themselves on top of their Kubernetes. But basically, any conformant Kubernetes cluster, we can install the components on. There's a Lagoon core, there's a Lagoon remote, and they talk to each other. Lagoon remote is what handles the actual web applications. It handles all that side of things. Lagoon core is there for orchestration. From a commercial hosted offering at Amazy.io, we've got hosting all over the planet. We can do anything from a single site up to an entire dedicated cluster if you're running dozens, hundreds of sites. There's a lot of ways of getting up and getting involved in it. We've sort of said all along that we really view that local to production workflow as being super important. So we'll work closely with developers to make sure that their site works in Docker Compose. That's probably the most important step to the whole process. We've got quite a bit of experience now in a range of applications, converting them to work in Docker Compose. But if a Docker Compose stack works, there's a fairly good chance that we can make that work in Kubernetes. And that's where it differs slightly from some of the native Kubernetes solutions that live entirely in Kubernetes. And that's where they require people to have sort of those full skills front to back. All we're asking developers is to learn how Docker Compose works. And we've got a few local tools that we provide to help people with that workflow. But yeah, once you've got a Docker Compose stack, from an amazing IO point of view, we can set people up with a plan to host their site to go through development. From a Lagoon point of view, if you don't know how to Kubernetes, then installing Lagoon is a bit of a stretch, but we're certainly more than happy to help out people that want to give it a go.
Amazing. And it's open sourced, right? Folks can contribute and...
Yeah, Lagoon itself has been open source for well over 4 years now. We do all of our development in the open. We engage deeply with all of our customers, and whether they're open source customers. A number of our commercial customers through Amazee.io also, they've chosen us because we're open source and because they can contribute. So we do have a fairly healthy contribution stream from our customers, whether it's looking at the way we configure our images or the way we've worded some of our examples. Some of our more ambitious customers sort of dig in and really get to the bottom of their particular issues. And yeah, we love that. We love anybody that gets involved with our projects.
Amazing. And I'll leave the links in the description below for folks who want to get started. And make sure you give a star on GitHub and check out the open issue if you want to contribute. But yeah, I mean, can we maybe do a short demo, to demonstrate it, like how it automates tasks and the infrastructure maintenance and management you were speaking about?
I mean, I won't show behind the scenes the Kubernetes side of things, but I can show sort of the application delivery side of things, how an application looks and what's doable on it.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, quick pause. Share my screen. So I should be sharing a screen that says, yes, that's correct. All right. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly take you through the user interface. This is an application that has been deployed into one of our test clusters. It's a Drupal example because we have the easiest Drupal examples are the easiest ones for us to demo. But it's a standard Docker Compose file. It runs an Nginx and a PHP service and just a MariaDB database. So what we do for this, that stands up, that works locally in Docker Compose. We add one YAML file that basically provides a couple of handy tasks to run on deployment. But that's the only thing that someone needs to put in their repository to make this work in Lagoon. So log myself back in. So we're running 3 environments here. We've got production routes, we've got test routes, we've got, we could do pull request routes as well. We can run it on various clusters. So this project actually runs in 2 different regions. So it can run across Europe, Europe West 1 and EU Central 1. So that's running on 2 different underlying Kubernetes clusters. If we look at an individual environment, you can see we've provided a bit of metadata about it here, created deployments, etc. Any deployment for this environment, we'll publish those build logs so we can see exactly what's happened when someone's pushed that piece of code. So the last code push was on the 10th of October. We can see it's gone through. This is doing an awful lot of the behind the scenes work. So configuring, building your images, it's configuring your services, your routes, your backups, it's templating your deployment, it's doing any work in cron job. We've got some tasks configured that we run after the rollout. So for Drupal particularly, there's something called an updb that does a database update. We can do a cache rebuild, but people can get really clever on the tasks that they string on the back of deployment. So for test environments, for pull request environments, we could synchronize databases from production. You can create test assets. You could run Behat tests. You could run Cypress tests. You can do all sorts of clever work there. At the end of the process, we run something called insights gathering. And those insights, for every single deployment, they run a process of gathering sort of key information about the site that's just been deployed. So for this, we'll run a set of image checks. So every image that's built, we will pull out layer information, we'll pull out environment variable information. But most importantly, this one will also do an SBOM now. SBOMs are getting more and more important as we look at supply chain security. So for every deployment, the platform will take a full SBOM of that application state as it was deployed. So we can see from here exactly what versions of each individual package we're running. And this SBOM is in a format, the Cyclone DX format. So it can be consumed by vulnerability scanners. So anybody who wants to do a vulnerability scan can use this SBOM to check to see whether their application has any deployed vulnerabilities. We collect facts about that given environment. So we can sort of see what version Alpine's running on the various services. We can see the Drupal version that's running. We can see what version PHP. These, for an individual environment, are interesting. If you're a site manager, etc., you can dig in straight away and you can find out if there's a Drupal vulnerability or a PHP vulnerability. You can find out straight away whether a site's potentially impacted just by looking at the user interface. On an aggregated scale, if you had 100 sites, imagine pulling this piece of information and finding out exactly which sites have which versions of PHP or which sites have which versions of Drupal. We configure backups. So from the UI, you can retrieve the scheduled backups. You can restore those. You can pull those down to your local. But we've also got a fairly comprehensive set of tasks built and developed that's very customizable. So for a Drupal site like this we can run a set number of Drupal tasks. So we can generate login links. We can do database dumps. We can synchronize between environments. But we can also develop custom tasks for those. So if you've got users that do some particular routine regularly, they might want to save records from a database. They might want to pull information between environments that's not database. It could be a simple file that's transferred. You can write a custom task, and that custom task is then available in the UI. So your users don't need SSH access. They don't need to dig into the back end of websites. They can go to the UI they're familiar with. They can run that task. And those tasks can have downloadable assets. So I could download the database dump I've just made there onto my local machine. As we've said, we can do pull request environments. We can do test environments. The whole idea is putting this kind of information straight in people's hands without them needing to know how to use complex CLI tools, how to do difficult queries, or more importantly, for non-developers to be able to access information without having to hassle a developer to say, hey, our site, what version of PHP are we on? What version of this are we on? When we were last deployed? All that information is there, ready to hand for anybody who's got access. So there's a couple of other cool things that we've been working on. So people can see exactly what's going on across all of their projects at any one time. So if you're managing a huge number of projects, you could see if you had builds going on in 10 different environments in pull requests. Probably should have triggered a build before I clicked on the build screen, but you'd see all those builds appear here. So at any stage, you can see exactly what's happening across the entire estate of all your websites. So we're really focused on giving website managers, people that manage multiple sites, some really cool tools to be able to use to help manage those sites better. The fact we run on Kubernetes and we've got the Kubernetes security, stability, scaling, healing behind the fact, it's a major factor for some people. For some people, they're really looking at how they can do their applications in as low a friction way as possible. And that's one of the main focuses that we're really looking at.
Amazing. Well, thanks a lot for sharing, Toby, and I'll leave all the links in the description below. So it's more like, people talk about the DevOps ecosystem. There's so many now projects that are focusing on the dev side of things, which I really like.
Obviously, we spend a lot of time looking at the DevOps ecosystem. We spend a lot of time looking at the other products in this application delivery platform category. One of the things that we've observed is a lot of them come at it as deploying an application from a Kubernetes point of view. So how do you help your Kubernetes team deploy an application? We think our focus is really quite unique because we're really looking at people deploying their applications into Kubernetes. So really coming at it from the angle that we're assuming that our application developers have no Kubernetes knowledge. They know someone senior in an office somewhere has said we should be doing cloud native, we should be on Kubernetes. How do we make that happen? And rather than everyone going away to a Kubernetes bootcamp and spending the next 3 years of their life trying how to finish that stupid owl drawing, we're saying come to Kubernetes, low friction, look at how an application delivery platform can help deliver your application into Kubernetes rather than Kubernetes delivering an application. And a lot of the solutions out there are particularly targeted towards single apps. So if we're looking at a large web property, you might have 25 different services that all interact together. That's a fantastic fit for some of those application delivery platforms. But rolling that out 10 or 20 or 30 times for 30 different sites, that's a fairly intensive piece of work. And there's a fair amount of duplication in effort required to keep rolling that out. We know the speed at which our customers bring projects on. We can get a project from Git repository to like first site in under 3 minutes fairly consistently, without the developer having to do anything other than have a Git repo. So we really pride ourselves at taking the application developer angle on this rather than the Kubernetes engineer angle. Obviously, it is great if you're a Kubernetes engineer because you don't have to worry so much about application developers and their specific needs and their talk about sort of optimizing various bits of the app. You can put them on an APM tool and they can work out how their app is the problem and not your infrastructure. That's the most common grind point we have between the two.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Well, thanks a lot for sharing, Toby, and it was lovely talking to you. And thanks for introducing ZeroOps to our community. And just one last question. What if someone wants to learn more about it? Can you maybe point them to some resources? I'll leave those in the description below.
Definitely. Head across to www.amazing.io. There's a full rundown of all the various offerings of the Amazing.io platform. The Lagoon project itself is linked to from the Amazing.io site, but we live at lagoon.sh and on GitHub as use Lagoon because 6-letter real words were all taken super early on in the internet heyday. But use Lagoon. We're there. We're on Twitter. The whole team is fairly findable on the socials. I make sure that the links go out. But yeah, come ask us questions. If you think there's something that could be of interest to you or the way that you work, definitely more than happy to try and talk any application. We can make it work.
Amazing. Well, thanks for joining, Toby. And once again, thanks everyone for watching. To learn more about it, just go check out the links in the description below. It's open source community, so you can get involved. And yeah, see you in the next one. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.